Well, as believers, we understand that God has divine purpose for everything he does. I mean, everything that God does, everything he asks us to do, everything in his divine plan has a purpose connected. And I think if you look at it, eternity is connected to everything he does. Because he's eternal. How can it not be connected to who he is if he's eternal? Everything that he has, everything he lays out, every plan that he makes, everything he proposes has a divine purpose to it. We don't understand it. We can't comprehend it. But it's still the same. It doesn't mean that we understand what he does or how he accomplishes it. We don't. We can't fully understand God. We know that a perfect God has a divine purpose for everything he does. Understanding we don't fully know it. And God has worked in our lives in many ways, and we have not understood it until we see it from the fulfilled point of view. Have you ever had a purpose in your life, things going on that you don't understand, and then you get past that in your life and you look back and you see God's hand all over it and you say, holy cow, that's how he did it. Well, when you're in the midst of it, you can't comprehend it. It doesn't seem to make sense. You try to wrap your mind around it, and you don't understand the things that are happening. And sometimes the things that happen to you are painful, and you go through it and you don't understand it until you get to the end of it. You say, wow, that is what you were trying to do. And I think of the life of Joseph. I mean, here he is. It's not his fault that he was favored by his father. He was born to the woman that his father wanted to marry originally. He got 4 wives for the price of one. And finally she had children, and he was the firstborn of the woman that he loved. And his father favored him. And it showed. He got a coat of many colors. His brothers did the same thing, and they hated him. And then he started having these dreams, these really awesome dreams. And he starts sharing the dreams with his brothers and his father, and it says they hated him all the more. They already hated him because he was favored. And then he starts having these dreams. He starts sharing the dreams. They hated him more. And then his father sends out one time and says, hey, why don't you go check up on your brothers for me? Okay. He goes out and they see him coming from a distance. And they say, let's kill him. I mean, they're planning to take his life. And, of course, Reuben talks him out of it. The firstborn says, oh, let's not take his life. They throw him in this pit, only to bring him out a little bit later and sell him to Midianites. And they take him to Egypt. And he belongs to Potiphar after that. Now, do you think at this point you say, man, I'm so glad God has a perfect plan for my life. My brothers hate me. It's wonderful. I'm thrown in this pit. And now I'm sold into slavery. We serve an awesome God. Now, he never wavered. He never mocked God. He kept his faith in God through all that. And then he's at Potiphar, and things start finally, for once, going well in his life. And he's appreciated. And Potiphar is looking at everything he does. And everything Joseph touches, God blesses. And Potiphar looks, he's not a stupid man. He says, you know what, Joseph? I got a job for you. What is it? You manage everything I have. You take it all. And he did, and it increased. And he understood that God was blessing him through Joseph. He put Joseph in charge of everything, except his wife. And his wife started taking notice of Joseph too. That's one fine-looking hunk of man. And then tried to seduce him. And he did not go for that. I said, how can I do this against God and my master? No, I won't do that. And he ends up fleeing, and he's set up, framed, thrown into prison for something he did not do. Do you think he understood it right then? God has a divine plan for my life. Then it goes a little bit further. Now he's in prison, and he's telling these dreams. These 2 people have dreams, and he tells the dreams. He says, you're going to get out. You're going to die. The one that's, you're going to live. So would you not forget me? And they forget about him. Until when? Until Pharaoh has a dream. He goes, oh yeah, you know what? When you had me incarcerated, when you locked me up, Pharaoh, I met a man in prison. He can tell you what your dream means. He told me my dream, and I'm here. He told the other person's dream. Remember that baker? When you cut his head off, he told him, 3 days you're going to die, and he did. This guy knows how to interpret dreams. I think he can take care of your dream. And next thing you know, Joseph is promoted second highest in Egypt to save all the world from famine. Now, at the very end, he looks at his brother and said, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good. He could see it afterwards. He just couldn't see it during it. and he didn't understand it, and he didn't like it. But he still trusted God and said, I know this. God is not going to leave me. He's not going to forsake me. And listen, you know what? That happened in the first book of the Bible. So you know what that means? None of the other books were written. He didn't have any other scripture to look to say, God could do this and all things work together for good. He didn't have anything like that. All he did was his daddy trusted God and he trusted God. That's all he had. Because his book that he's in is not even written yet. Talk about a deep faith and putting your trust in God. They work out even though you don't know it. In fact, we can't see what he's doing until all the pieces come together in sometimes a remarkable way. And I got story after story after story, but I'll just share one that kind of plays out. And that's when, we were getting ready to go into ministry. We had Pastor Noss, who was a great pastor to us, led me to the Lord, and just kind of discipled me, groomed me, and so thankful for him. He was leaving the church, although he's forced out of the church, and he just was leaving. And at the same time, my step-grandparents both died within a certain amount of time of each other. And they were going to church. I was glad that those were the ones that passed away. At least they both knew Christ. They had recently gotten saved, and they knew Jesus Christ, and I was excited that they were the ones that passed away of all the ones in my family. And they had a pastor that came and did the service. He had relocated during time, but he came back from Ohio just to do their services. Well, anyway, we go from the funeral to the reception. And on the way home, when we went that way, I would like to stop and had just enough time to stop in a Christian bookstore. And I did, and I saw the plaque I want to get for Pastor Noss, because he's leaving, right? So there's this pastor's plaque. It was on clearance. I was like, oh, yeah, I like it better. And I ended up buying it because I want to give it to Pastor Noss as a going-away gift for all that he's done for me. So we got it. It was Saturday, Sunday. I was going to give it to him, so I had a gift wrap. And I'm driving to the reception, and I hear God say, you need to give that plaque to that pastor who did your grandparents' funeral. I was like, Lord, I didn't buy it for him. I mean, when I bought it, I'm going to give it to Pastor Noss tomorrow. He said, you need to give it to this pastor. I said, Lord, maybe you didn't hear me the first time. I didn't buy it for him. I like him and all, but I'm going to give this to Pastor Noss tomorrow. That's what I'm going to do with it. He just said, you need to give it to that pastor. After the third time, I'm like, okay. I'll give it to him, but I ain't going to like it. I'll give it to him. And I did. I gave it to him when we got there. I said, Pastor, here's this for you. And I gave it to him, and he opened it up, and you could see right away, tears start building up in his eyes. And he said, you have no idea what this means. I said, nope, I don't. Because I didn't. Wasn't for you, but he said, back where I came from, this plaque hangs in the Christian bookstore, and I see it every time I walk out. But this is, I've wanted it for a while, but this is not something a pastor buys for himself. It's not. It's got to be given to him. I said, okay. And I said, well, Lord, okay, I get it. Okay, that meant more to him. And so I talked to Pastor Noss the next day. I said, hey, it's this plaque, and God wanted to give it to someone else. And he says, I got 2 of those. See, it wouldn't have meant a thing if I did it my way. It wouldn't have meant anything for him. He already had 2. Just put it with the rest of them. Just maybe you can juggle them. It wouldn't mean anything to him. But it meant something. God knows that. And when he asks us to do something, he already has a purpose and he has something in place. And do you understand that God knows more than we do? A lot more than we do. And it plays out that way. And we see the details come together, and we understand that God was working in ways we couldn't comprehend until after it was fulfilled. It happened that way. We are amazed by God's divine omnipotence. We are. Someone that knows everything can put things together and intertwine even complicated issues. And the complicated issue we're going to look at today is this. How does God intertwine his divine purpose, his sovereignty, with the free will of man? How do you put those two together? Does man have a right to choose? Does he choose what he's going to do, what he's not going to do? Or is it all detailed out before him and he can't help but walk in what's already chosen for him? Which way is it? How about both? Someone that knows everything, listen, someone that knows everything knows every choice and decision you could make. And he knows which ones you will make. We've all made decisions. Some of them, not so good. I love that one commercial where these two ladies are sitting at the pool and they're talking about making decisions. And this was a good decision, and sometimes not so good decisions. And they show the backside. They have that tattoo of the whole group together all over their back. You say, yeah, not so much. You know, sometimes you get those decisions, you think, probably wasn't the best one. We've made decisions before and we regretted them, and those were our decisions to make, correct? Sometimes God would not want us to make decisions we make, but he knows what we're going to choose. So how do we put that together where we have a divine will and God's sovereignty knowing what's going to happen, his divine plan for us? Because we're going to see it in Scripture today with Pharaoh. You look at Pharaoh and you go through that, and God called Moses to go set his people free, to go and tell him, let my people go. And Pharaoh didn't listen the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time, seventh time, eighth time, ninth time, or the 10th time. Well, maybe the 10th time a little bit, but not a whole lot. And when you look at this, you see both of these happening. Did God harden Pharaoh's heart, or did Pharaoh harden his heart against God? Both. Think, how does that happen? Listen, I don't know how God does it. I don't know how he intertwines free will and his sovereignty, but he does it. If you'll look at these scriptures for me, look at the first one in Exodus. Exodus 18 or 8:15. He says this, but when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and did not heed them, as the Lord had said. You know, he went and said, okay, if you just do what I say, then if you just take this away, I'll let the people go. And when he got the relief, when Pharaoh called off the plague, whatever plague that was at that time, and he got his relief, it says that Pharaoh hardened his heart against God. Okay, makes sense. You can harden your heart, right? You can have something harden your heart and not want to listen. But look at the next passage in Exodus 10:1. Now what happens? Now the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants, that I may show the signs of mine before him. So who hardened his heart, God or Pharaoh? Both. How does God work those two together? That he knows his choices that you're going to make and incorporates them in his plan. He says that this is what I've done. Because listen, if God made that choice for him, why is he held accountable for that choice? He chose that and he was held accountable. Are you held accountable for the choices you make? Well, what if God said, you're going to do this? Well, then it wasn't my choice. So how does he merge the free will and sovereignty? That's a question throughout the ages, and that's something that Dr. Enns, a good friend of mine, professor, wrote the Moody Bible Handbook that I sit down and just used to glean from him. He said, I just can't comprehend it. The salvation of man, how God's divine purpose and his sovereignty and the free will of man, how does it work out together? He says, I have no idea, but it does. And that's what we have to say. I don't know how God does it, but he does. Because we're held accountable by our own choices. We are. We made them. We used our free will and we made the choices that we choose to make, although God knows what they are. And sometimes it says he's involved in that process. But God didn't sin when you chose to sin, did he? No. We did. Did God know you're going to sin? Yes. So how do you know he knew we were going to sin? Because he paid for every single one of them. Oh, he knows what they are. He paid for them. And he knew every sin he was dying for. He understood there's not one sin that passed by him. Matter of fact, we're told in Revelation, he has all of them written down. Every sin from every single person is recorded. And at the very end, when the books are open, they will be held accountable for every single sin they've committed against him. Now, did he make them sin? No, he did not. They chose to sin. But he knew they would. And he used purposes like that, and other people, not only Pharaoh, but Judas scared others. So we have all this taking place. This is what Paul's going to talk about right now. That's why I said it's going to get a little bit deeper, and it is. Because you get to Romans 9:14. That's where we're at in the book of Romans 9:14. He says, what shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? No, certainly not. There's no unrighteousness with him. He's holy, he's loving, he's just,